What's going on? Welcome to the Fireball Mullet channel. I'm Stan Kennedy, and today's video we're going to be putting in a new fuel pump system. Yeah, this thing is sweet. If you guys remember when we did the dyno, that Hellcat 525, it just couldn't handle it. So we went ahead, that 525 ran out of pump when we were doing the E85 tune. If you guys remember and you saw that video, I think the pump gas was somewhere around 690, something like that. And on E85 it ran out of pump somewhere around 4,000 RPM. So this finally we're going to solve that issue, hopefully. I went ahead and picked up a dual pump setup that has a boost reference that works off of basically a Hobbs switch, right? So you boost hits, it hits 4 psi, boom, it connects the circuit for the relay, and now you got two pumps running. It's basically the short way of thinking about it. So I went to Hawks, got picked up. Now you guys know I got a 4th gen tank here. I picked up they have this amazing setup that's really just plug and play, and I'm not kidding you, man. This thing is literally, the only thing I had to do wiring wise, and I'll talk about this in the video, is triggering it from the 3rd gen plug that sits behind the hump that goes through the seat there. You got where your fuel gauge sending unit is, and also the fuel pump, the stock wire that actually runs the stock fuel pump. I use that as the trigger for the relays. So that's really the only 3 wires that you have to, 3 or 4 wires that you have to hook up and do some custom wiring. Everything else is plug and play. From the back of the pump, they have this new connector all the way to the front of the car where I hooked it up to the alternator and then grounded it. So it's like the Hotwire kit along with the pumps, and a little pricey, but honestly I think this system's going to be the way to go. So I'm really excited to show you guys about this pump, and we're going to take a spin in the car after we get it in, and I think it's going to be fun. So let's get right to it. Enough of me yapping. Let's get this bad boy in here. All right, so this is from Hawks Motorsports. It's a dual fuel pump assembly, and what's really nice about this is plug and play for a 4th gen tank. You guys know that I've got the 4th gen tank installed here, so it's really plug and play. And what's really cool is, you can see here, you got the 2 socks, one for each pump. But what I really love about it is the fact that it retains the stock bucket. So you got the return, basically pumping gas back into the bucket here. So kind of reduces the chance of slosh and kind of fuel starvation there. And it's really cool, they've got it all, it comes like this, like nothing to put together here. It's got the wiring harness, it's got a new connector here that'll go to this harness, which I'll show you in a second. This one right here, the stock plug at your gas tank fuel assembly there in the back will actually plug right into this as well. So this is essentially your fuel gauge sending wires here and a ground. So you got 2 purple there, one with a green stripe, and then a ground there. So that's really your ohm reference for your fuel tank. Now, one thing to note, since this is for a 4th gen, I'll have to swap out for my Herco, which is 0 to 90 hertz. Remember, the 4th gen has a different ohm rating on the gauge, on the gas gauge. So 3rd gen guys, you have to go ahead, swap out to this 0 to 90 Herco. And I've got another video, you guys have probably seen it here. So you just need to go ahead, splice that in or depin it, however you want to do it, and get that on there. And then the rest of this is really plug and play. So taking you to, they even gave me a new float here. So everything's ready to rock. So what's cool is, now this is going to be at the battery or alternator. I'm probably going to run this to the alternator since my battery's in the trunk. So I'm going to run this. You can see here you got both power cables here for the hot side. That's going to go right on the alternator positive. And then I'll go ahead and ground this probably on the alternator mounting bolt there or somewhere on the chassis. So that's the ground for the main harness and the power from the main harness. And the idea is you've got these couple nice fuses here. And then you've got your place for your Hobbs switch. This one is connected here. You know that the Hobbs switch, once the boost reference hits
the switch basically connects as if you had it wired here. So they give you kind of the option if you wanted to run another Hobbs there or whatever, but we really just need that. There's the Hobbs switch right there. So that right there will connect right into that, and that's just going to say, hey, when it hits probably 4 psi, I got to look at what this thing is rated for, but once it hits that, yeah, 4 psi boost, it'll make that connection, and now you got a second pump. So the idea with this is you run on one pump as you're kind of street driving, and as soon as you do it for Dale, you get into that second pump, bam, it's gonna boost reference, connect, and then it's gonna power that other pump there. Pretty simple, but this is all plug and play, guys, right here. So this is just really the extension, and then on the other end, you got the new plug that goes into their new plug here, right? So that we got to route this up through the gas tank area, up through the back of the chassis, get that up there. And then you got a couple relays as well, one for each pump, and then a ground. So pretty straightforward here. So that's kind of the setup, guys. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and get this Herco one switched over for this one, and then we'll go ahead and drop it in there. All right, guys, let's give you a quick update. I went ahead, switched over the Herco for the original there. Again, this is 0 to 90 ohms. Now the Chinese didn't quite do this one right. You guys, I know somebody's going to ask me. So this this one is a little bit higher. So it has it won't fit in there with the get the little clip wherever it went. There's a little clip that goes in here that comes up through the top. That clip's not going to work. So what I normally do is I just do a zip tie, and then I put the head of the zip tie, if you will, in between these two so they don't squeeze. So they don't squeeze and this falls out. So it doesn't lay exactly flush, but it's good enough. So anyway, just some FYI on that. So we'll go ahead and get this bad boy in. All right, guys, went ahead, dropped the tank a little bit from underneath so I could get everything in there, and so I can get this is a pretty big fitting, so I had to drop the tank. I gotta bolt the tank back up a little bit, but not a bad job there. Snake that through. So now we got all our connections, and you can see here there's the two main connections. You got the new round one, right? And then this is the one, this is going to be a stock 4th gen connector. I have mine wired to the little connector in the hump there. So you have to basically, there's 4 wires to 3 wires. You have 2 for the gas tank sending unit. You got 1 for the trigger, which is the gray one, and then you got a ground one, right? So basically hook them up, and the rest is plug and play. So that's really it. So got this back on, got the lines back on. So we'll go ahead and get the tank back up. Then we just mount the harness up through the car and bolt it to the alternator and fire this bitch up. I'm gonna show you guys under the car, and without jacking it up, let's just use this air here. I'll hook this up. Alright, so there's your stock, basically your stock plug there. That's the one that runs behind your back seat, okay? Now, that one is the one, there's 3 wires there, and that's the only thing I had to change on this in terms of wiring, was wiring that up into the harness. You can see here, there are the relays right there, and I've got them mounted. So this is basically coming out from under the tank. We've got the 2, basically the 2 power wires that are feeding the heavy gauge power, if you will. And then the trick is you just wire that gauge, that basically that wire there that's going through the pump, that connector,
you end up with the fuel pump trigger being the trigger for these two relays, right? And so that's how you trigger the system there. So you use your stock fuel pump trigger, and for mine on the LS swap, I've got my fuel pump coming out of the ECM, the fuel pump trigger, basically to this stock wire. So it's really just a trigger instead of running the pump is how it works. So we got that all set up, and then from there it just runs down the car. Pretty simple there. It's going to follow those lines down, your fuel lines, just follow those fuel lines all the way down, follow those up through the engine bay, and that's pretty much it. So really this was the only thing that I had to essentially go ahead and wire, but like I said, that's the connector there that you'll want to tie into, and then just mount your relays and you should be all set. So pretty cool stuff. All right, let me walk you through how this harness is set up. So I went ahead, routed it underneath the car, basically coming out from underneath the tank, and it's just ran by your typical place where your lines run underneath the car, and so after it runs through the car, it kind of comes up through the engine bay here. So pretty easy, and again, it's all plug and play. So I wanted to point out a couple things here, the way I've got this set up. First of all, I went ahead and you can see there it's hooked up to the alternator, and then the ground, I've got it ground right here on the chassis, so you can kind of see that little screw there. So that's the harness there, and again you got both positive wires. The other thing is, as part of this harness, you saw where you can hook up the Hobbs switch. So again, I've got that, and I went ahead and mounted that right here on this unused tab here on the windshield washer reservoir, which I just put in. I kind of moved over my fuel regulator and got this back on. But with this, which is cool, is I just tee it into my boost reference fuel pressure regulator here, and we just kind of teed it into that, and this is basically 4 psi. It's going to engage the second pump, which is pretty cool. So that's how that works. And again, all this was all plug and play. Of course, I did have to figure out how to mount this Hobbs switch, as well as go ahead and tee it into the fuel pressure regulator. But that's really it. Hook it up to the alternator, and of course this right here is going to fire off the relays, and that's, one pump runs constant, the other pump runs off 4 psi boost, and we should have plenty of fuel, which is pretty cool. I also wanted to mention for that, we're pretty much all set. So with that, we're ready for another dyno trip. We're going to see if this fuel system can handle the E85, which I think it should, because we were already pretty close with the 525 Hellcat pump. So I'm pretty sure that we will be very, very good here. Just driving the car around, when I'm in boost, I can see the fuel pressure come up, and I went ahead and added, and I'm going to do a separate video on this. Let me show you. I went ahead and added a fuel pressure sensor right on the rail here, and this is also a AEM. So I went ahead and added that. It's just a little elbow there, and then the fuel, and then this is a AEM fuel pressure, oil pressure. It's the same thing, but they give you a couple different face plates there. I'm using the fuel pressure one, and I'll show you inside the car here what that looks like. Let's go inside. All right, So this is also new, and again, I'm going to do a separate video on this guy here. This is the wideband here, and this is the fuel pressure. So I can actually see. So when I'm in boost, what this really gives me, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of these gauge pods. I'm really not, just because I really like the look of stock here. So, but you know, when you have boost and that sort of thing, you really have to, you know, implement something like this, because if you're ever into boost and something's wrong with your fuel system, you're gonna explode that bad boy. So anyway, I went ahead and did that. But let me just kind of, I'll turn on, you can kind of see there, it primes up. All right, so we'll let that dial back in, but you can see now this gets you a little bit, you know, normally this runs 60 psi, but with the boost reference, right now it kind of pulls it down a little bit while it's just kind of idle and not into anything. So all right, I'll show you in the back here. Got everything buttoned back up. Got to clean up some things, but got the shade back on, carpet all back in, and all that good stuff there. So pretty much the job's all done. I've been testing it. The pump seems great. I'm into boost. Wideband shows it delivering plenty of fuel, and also the fuel gauge will actually come up to the high 60s. So it's been really good, man. So I'm pretty excited about that. All right, so all set with the fuel system. Next step will be the dyno. We'll get that E85 new number there. As you guys know, it did 690 something on pump gas, which is what I'm running right now, and it ran out of fuel on the Hellcat 525 for E85 somewhere around the low 70s. So we'll get the new E85 number, and excited to get this thing buttoned up and done. So far, just kind of driving the car around. Fuel pump looks like it's got, just looking at the wideband gauge, the fuel pump is just right there, man. It's got it. You can see it when you're in boost. The wideband makes sure it gets much richer. So I'm pretty confident we've got this thing worked out. Go ahead and take a little ride here and see how this thing works. Just me kind of looking at the gauges, seeing how that works. This thing is just, man, when you don't drive it for a little while it's under construction, it's just like, what? Whoops. Somebody's beeping at me. Whoops. Oh, the light's green. I'm sitting there talking to you guys, and the light's green. Woo-hoo-hoo. That RPM up, baby. I did a little bit of data logging too, so I just kind of know that on the tune everything looks pretty good. So I feel pretty safe with it. I was just kind of data logging with HP tuners a little bit, just making sure everything was good. And my exhaust, I still got a little bit of a leak around where the collector on the header and the pipe and the connection pipe is coming in. So around idle and low RPM, it's reading a little leaner. But of course, you know, that's not something that will be catastrophic. So, you know, when I'm in the RPMs, that's where it really matters. And you know, it was definitely, I got it within a few percent pulling gas out, so I feel like it's a pretty safe tune right now. Things are still, you know, it's still the tune from where I had it tuned, but it, you know, the fuel pump shouldn't change anything as long as you maintain that pressure. You know, the fuel regulator is going to keep that 60 psi. Well, that's today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I got a bunch more content. I'm catching up on everything. I got a bunch more things that's coming out, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. You don't miss anything. And I'll see you guys on the flip side.